Sometimes the most terrifying moment in a marriage is not discovering a lie, but realizing the person you trust most may be hiding something you never imagined. If you're new to this channel, just subscribe now and say it in the comment section. For 6 years, Amara believed she knew everything about her husband. Tunde Adeyemi was the kind of man people described as dependable. He woke up at the same time every morning, drank his tea without sugar, and left the house by 7:30 a.m. sharp. He never forgot anniversaries, never raised his voice, and never stayed out late without a reason. That was the man Amara married. That was the man she trusted completely. Their home in Lagos was quiet and warm, a 2-bedroom apartment tucked inside a peaceful neighborhood where the evening smelled of fried plantain and distant traffic. Every night followed a comfortable rhythm. Amara would cook while soft music played from the living room. Tunde would sit at the dining table scrolling through emails or reading the news. They would eat together. Talk about their day. Laugh about small things. Simple. Predictable. Safe. But recently, something had changed. Amara noticed it first in the small details. Tunde had started coming home later than usual. At first it was only 30 minutes. Then an hour. Eventually some nights stretched past 10 p.m. When she asked where he had been, his answers were always calm but strangely vague. Work was busy today. Traffic was terrible. Some things came up at the office. None of the explanations sounded impossible. But none of them felt completely true either. One evening, as Amara set plates on the table, she watched him sitting on the couch staring at his phone. His face looked serious, almost tense. "Dinner is ready," she called. "Coming," he replied. But he didn't move. Instead, his thumb moved quickly across the screen as if typing something urgent. Amara walked past him toward the kitchen. The moment she approached, the phone screen went dark. Tunde locked it instantly. She paused. "Everything okay?" she asked casually. "Yes," he said quickly. "Just work." Work. That word had become his favorite answer lately. Amara forced a small smile and returned to the kitchen, but something inside her chest felt tight. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. Doubt. Over the next few weeks the strange behavior continued. Tunde sometimes stepped outside to answer phone calls. Sometimes he stayed awake long after Amara had gone to bed. Once, she woke up in the middle of the night and noticed the glow of light from the living room. Tunde was sitting alone, whispering into his phone. The moment he saw her standing there, he ended the call. "Sorry," he said. "Did I wake you?" "No," she replied softly. But she had. And she couldn't sleep afterward. Still, Amara told herself she was imagining things. Marriage required trust. And Tunde had never given her a real reason to doubt him. Until the night everything felt truly strange. It was a quiet Friday. Rain had fallen earlier, leaving the streets damp and shining under the streetlights. The air smelled fresh through the slightly open window. Amara had finished washing the dishes and was drying her hands when she noticed Tunde sitting unusually still on the couch. He wasn't watching television. He wasn't reading. He was just waiting. His eyes kept drifting toward his phone on the table. "Are you expecting a call?" Amara asked. Tunde looked up quickly, almost startled. "No," he said. "Just checking something." She nodded slowly. But the tension in the room felt thick. At exactly 10:47 p.m., the silence broke. Tunde's phone buzzed loudly on the table. Both of them looked at it. For a brief second the screen lit up. And Amara saw the message. "Don't forget tonight." She must not know. Her stomach dropped. Tunde grabbed the phone immediately, his movement sudden and tense. He stood up quickly. I need to step out for a bit," he said. Amara blinked in confusion. Step out? Now. Yes. It's something important. At almost 11. It won't take long. His tone wasn't angry. But it was firm. Too firm. Amara watched him grab his car keys from the table. He avoided her eyes as he slipped on his jacket. Is everything okay? She asked again, her voice quieter now. Tunde hesitated for half a second. Then he nodded. Yes. Don't worry. But he still wouldn't look directly at her. Moments later, he opened the door and stepped outside. The door closed softly behind him. The apartment fell silent. Amara stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the empty space where her husband had been standing just seconds earlier. Her heart was beating faster than usual. The message replayed in her mind again and again. She must not know. Who was she? The answer felt painfully obvious. She walked slowly toward the window. Outside, she saw Tunde entering his car. The engine started. Headlights cut through the dark street. And then he drove away. Amara remained standing there long after the car disappeared from view. Her thoughts raced wildly. Maybe it was work. Maybe it was a surprise for her. Maybe she was overthinking everything. But deep inside, another voice whispered something she didn't want to hear. What if it wasn't innocent? What if her husband was living a life she knew nothing about? Amara paced the living room nervously. Her chest felt tight. Her mind flooded with possibilities she didn't want to imagine. Another woman. A secret meeting. A hidden life. She shook her head quickly. No, she whispered to herself. Tunde wouldn't do that. But the message. She must not know. Those 4 words refused to leave her mind. Minutes passed. 10. 15. 20. Amara sat down on the couch, staring at the door. Her heart felt heavy with uncertainty. Finally, she stood up again. A strange determination began rising inside her. She loved Tunde. She trusted him. But tonight something felt too wrong to ignore. If there was truly nothing to hide, then following him would prove it. And if there was something hidden, she deserved to know the truth. Amara grabbed her handbag from the chair. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her car keys. For a moment she hesitated near the door. 6 years of marriage stood behind that hesitation. 6 years of trust. 6 years of believing she knew the man she married. But tonight, something inside her told her that the truth was waiting somewhere outside that door. And the only way to find it was to follow him. Amara took a deep breath. Then she stepped out of the apartment, locked the door quietly, and walked quickly toward her car under the dim Lagos streetlights. She started the engine and drove into the night. Amara gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove out of their quiet street and onto the main road. The Lagos night was alive in its usual way, motorcycles buzzing past like restless insects, distant music floating from roadside bars, and headlights stretching endlessly through the humid air. Normally she found the city comforting at night. But tonight everything felt unfamiliar, as if she had stepped into someone else's life. She kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead, searching for Tunde's silver car among the moving lights. A few seconds later, she saw it. 2 cars ahead. Relief mixed with anxiety rushed through her chest. Okay, just stay calm, she whispered to herself. She slowed slightly, making sure not to get too close. The last thing she wanted was for him to notice her following. Tunde's car moved steadily through traffic, turning left at a junction that led deeper into the city. Amara followed, her heartbeat echoing loudly in her ears. As the streets grew busier, she relaxed a little. It was easier to blend in with other vehicles now. Still, questions kept circling inside her mind. Where was he going? Who had sent that message? And why had he looked so nervous when he left the house? The road stretched forward under rows of orange streetlights. Vendors were still open along the sidewalks, selling roasted corn, bottled drinks, and late-night snacks to passing drivers. Everything looked normal. Yet Amara's chest felt anything but calm. Tunde suddenly switched lanes and turned onto a narrower road. Amara quickly followed, pretending to adjust her mirror so she wouldn't look too obvious. The difference was immediate. The lively noise of the main road faded behind her as they entered a quieter area of Lagos she barely recognized. The buildings here looked older, some with cracked walls and faded paint. A few streetlights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the pavement. "Why would Tunde come here?" she murmured. Her husband worked at a corporate office on Victoria Island. The people he usually met were business colleagues, bankers, or clients. Nothing about this neighborhood suggested any of that. Tunde's car slowed down. Amara quickly reduced her speed as well, making sure to keep a comfortable distance. After another minute, his car turned again and rolled toward a narrow street lined with old apartment buildings. Finally, he parked in front of a two-story structure with dim lights glowing behind dusty windows. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Tunde stepped out of the car. She quickly drove past the building before he could notice her, then parked her car a short distance away beneath a tall tree. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned off the engine. The street was quiet except for the distant barking of a dog somewhere in the neighborhood. Amara leaned forward carefully and looked through her windshield. Tunde was still standing beside his car. He looked around briefly, almost as if checking whether anyone was watching. Amara ducked slightly in her seat. After a moment, another figure appeared from the building. A woman. Amara's stomach tightened instantly. The woman walked confidently toward Tunde, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. Even from a distance, Amara could tell she was tall and elegant. Her long dress moved gently with each step, and the streetlight revealed smooth dark skin and carefully styled hair. The woman stopped in front of Tunde. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Then she smiled and stepped forward to hug him. Amara's chest felt like it had been struck by something heavy. The hug lasted longer than it should have. Not the quick, polite embrace of colleagues. This looked intimate. Familiar. Pain spread through Amara's chest as she watched them. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "So it's true," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her mind began spinning with painful possibilities she had tried so hard to avoid. Was this the reason he had been coming home late? Was this woman the person behind the secret messages? The woman pulled away slightly, still smiling as she spoke to Tunde. Amara couldn't hear their words from this distance, but their body language looked comfortable. Too comfortable. Tunde glanced around the street again, his expression serious. Then the woman reached into a bag she had been carrying. She pulled out a small box. It was dark, metallic, and secured with a tiny lock. Amara frowned in confusion. This wasn't the kind of exchange she expected to see between two people having an affair. The woman handed the box to Tunde carefully. He took it slowly. Even from her parked car, Amara could see his face clearly under the streetlight. At first he looked curious. Then he opened the box. And his entire expression changed. The calm confidence Amara had always known on her husband's face disappeared instantly. His eyes widened. His shoulders stiffened. His face turned pale. Amara leaned forward slightly, trying to see inside the box. But from this distance, she couldn't make out what was inside. The woman said something quietly to him. Tunde nodded slowly, still staring into the box as if what he saw inside had shocked him. Amara felt a wave of confusion wash over her. If this was some kind of secret relationship, why did he look so disturbed? Why did the box seem so important? The woman closed the box gently and spoke again, her tone appearing serious now. Tunde rubbed his forehead with one hand, clearly stressed. Then he looked around the street once more. Amara quickly leaned back in her seat again. Her thoughts were racing. Nothing about this situation made sense. Her husband had come to meet another woman late at night in a strange neighborhood. They had hugged. But instead of romance, they were discussing something that seemed urgent and tense. And that lockbox. What could possibly be inside it that made Tunde react like that? Outside, the woman gestured toward the building behind her. Tunde nodded. Together, they began walking toward the entrance. Amara felt panic rise inside her chest. If they went inside, she would lose sight of them. Without thinking further, she opened her car door slowly and stepped out into the warm night air. Her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure someone might hear it. She closed the door gently and walked quietly along the edge of the street, keeping to the darker side where the streetlight couldn't expose her. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her emotions were tangled between fear, curiosity, and the painful need to know the truth. By the time she reached the corner of the building, Tunde and the woman had already entered. The door closed behind them. Amara stood outside for a moment, staring at the building. A faint light glowed through one of the windows. Voices echoed faintly from inside. She moved closer slowly, careful not to make any noise. Her entire body felt tense. Whatever secret Tunde was hiding, it was inside that building. Amara pressed her back against the rough exterior wall of the building, trying to steady her breathing. The faint yellow light from inside spilled through the dusty window beside her, stretching across the cracked pavement. She could hear voices now. Not clearly. Just muffled conversations drifting through the glass. Her heart was beating so loudly she was afraid it might give her away. "What are you doing, Amara?" she whispered to herself. 6 years of marriage had never brought her to a moment like this, hiding outside a building in the middle of the night, spying on the man she trusted most. But the image of Tunde hugging that woman kept flashing through her mind. And the message on his phone. She must not know. Amara leaned slightly toward the window, careful not to reveal herself. Inside, the room looked larger than she expected. The walls were plain and worn, but the space was bright with overhead lights. A long table stood in the center, covered with papers and folders. Tunde stood near the table with the elegant woman from outside. They were talking. Their expressions looked serious. Amara strained to hear. "It's dangerous," the woman said quietly. Her voice carried faintly through the glass. Tunde nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I know," he replied. "But we can't delay this anymore." The woman folded her arms. "If anyone finds out." "They won't," Tunde interrupted firmly. Amara's heart pounded harder. "Find out what?" She leaned closer, trying to catch every word. "She must never find out," the woman continued. Amara froze. Her stomach twisted painfully. She knew exactly who she was. "Amara cannot be involved in this," Tunde said quietly. The words felt like a knife sliding into her chest. Why? Why would her own husband say something like that? The woman nodded slowly. "I understand. But you're carrying too much alone." "I've handled it for 3 years," Tunde replied. "I can handle it a little longer." 3 years? Amara's mind spun. 3 years of what? Her thoughts raced as she continued watching through the window. Tunde placed the small locked box on the table and opened it again. He looked down at its contents with deep concentration. The woman pointed to something inside the box. "We received these earlier today," she said. Tunde sighed heavily. "This is worse than I expected." Amara tried to see inside, but the angle of the window blocked her view. Just then, another voice spoke from behind Tunde. "Good evening." Amara blinked in surprise. She hadn't noticed someone else entering the room. a middle-aged man walked toward Tunde, wearing a simple suit and carrying a briefcase. He greeted Tunde with a respectful nod. "Good evening, Chairman." Amara felt her breath stop. "Chairman?" Her confusion deepened instantly. Tunde wasn't a chairman. He worked a regular office job managing financial reports for a company downtown. He had never mentioned leading anything. Yet the man standing in the room clearly addressed him with respect. Tunde nodded politely. "Good evening, Mr. Bello. Thank you for coming." The elegant woman from earlier gestured toward the table. "We're waiting for the others," she explained. "Others?" Amara frowned. Within minutes, more people began arriving. One by one. A young woman wearing a doctor's coat. An older man carrying stacks of documents. Another woman holding a laptop bag. Each person entered the room with the same respectful greeting. "Good evening, Chairman." "Nice to see you again, Chairman." "Good evening, sir." Amara felt like the ground beneath her feet was shifting. She had followed her husband here expecting to uncover betrayal. Instead, she was witnessing something she couldn't understand. The room slowly filled with people. Doctors. Professionals. Volunteers. Everyone seemed to know Tunde. And every single person treated him with the same level of respect. Inside the room, Tunde stood at the center of the table as the group gathered around. The elegant woman tapped the table lightly. "All right, everyone," she said. "Let's begin." The room grew quiet. Amara leaned closer to the window. Her curiosity had completely overtaken her fear now. What exactly was happening inside this building? The woman looked toward Tunde. "Before we continue, I want to thank someone who has made all of this possible." She gestured toward him. "Tunde Adeyemi." Several people in the room nodded and smiled. Tunde looked slightly uncomfortable with the attention. The woman continued. "For 3 years, this center has survived because of one person's dedication and sacrifice." Amara's eyebrows pulled together in confusion. "Center? What center?" The woman rested her hands on the table. "Without Tunde's support, none of the children we've helped would be alive today." "Children?" Amara blinked in disbelief. Inside the room, a young doctor spoke up. "We received another emergency case this afternoon," she said, opening a file on the table. "Severe infection. The hospital refused treatment without payment." Tunde nodded. "And now?" "She's stable," the doctor replied. "Thanks to the funds that arrived this morning." "Funds?" Amara's chest tightened as realization slowly began forming in her mind. Another man spoke next. "The new equipment arrived as well. The clinic can finally handle minor surgeries." The woman beside Tunde smiled slightly. "We couldn't have done that without our chairman." Tunde raised his hand gently. "Please," he said quietly. "Let's not use that title tonight." "But you are the chairman," the man insisted with a small laugh. Tunde shook his head. "I'm just someone who wants to help." Amara stood frozen outside the window. Her thoughts were colliding in every direction. Her husband wasn't cheating. He wasn't meeting another woman for a secret affair. He was meeting with doctors. With volunteers. With people discussing children and medical emergencies. Her eyes drifted back to the lockbox on the table. The elegant woman opened it again. Inside were stacks of medical reports and photographs. Amara could now see them clearly through the glass. Pictures of children. Some smiling. Some lying in hospital beds. Some looking weak but alive. The woman lifted one photograph gently. "This boy arrived here last year," she said. "Severe malnutrition. No family willing to care for him." She looked at Tunde. "Today he's healthy and attending school." Tunde smiled softly. Another photo was passed around the table. A little girl connected to medical tubes. The doctor spoke again. Her surgery was impossible without financial support. Everyone in the room looked toward Tunde. Amara felt tears forming in her eyes. Her husband, the man she thought was hiding something shameful, had secretly been helping save children. For 3 years. And she had never known. Inside the room, Tunde cleared his throat. "Remember," he said quietly, "this isn't about me. The goal is to make sure no child gets turned away from treatment because of money." The woman nodded. "But people deserve to know what you've done." "No," Tunde said firmly. He looked around the room. "This must remain private." "Why?" someone asked. Tunde's voice softened. "Because I didn't do it for recognition." He paused. "And my wife, she must never find out. I don't want her worrying about how much I've sacrificed to make this possible." Outside the window, Amara's tears slipped down her cheeks. Everything she thought she knew tonight had been completely wrong. Her husband wasn't hiding betrayal. He was hiding kindness. Amara stood outside the window, her body completely still as the truth settled slowly inside her chest. The tension that had filled her heart earlier that night had transformed into something entirely different: shock, admiration, and a deep sense of humility. Inside the room, the meeting continued. The elegant woman stood near the table, flipping through some of the documents that had come out of the locked box. The papers looked official: medical reports, financial statements, and lists of names. "These are the latest cases," she said, sliding a few files toward the doctors sitting across from her. One of the doctors adjusted her glasses and opened a folder. "We admitted for children this week," she explained. 2 with severe infections, 1 with a broken leg that had been untreated for days, and 1 newborn who needed emergency care. Tunde listened quietly. Amara watched him carefully through the window. This was a side of her husband she had never seen before. The calm authority in his posture. The seriousness in his eyes. He wasn't acting like an office worker attending a casual meeting. He looked like a leader. A man carrying responsibility. "How much will the treatments cost?" Tunde asked. The doctor glanced down at the report. "Approximately 2 million naira," she replied carefully. There was a brief silence in the room. Some of the volunteers exchanged worried looks. But Tunde didn't hesitate. "Approve it," he said. The doctor looked up. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he answered calmly. "Those children cannot wait." The elegant woman smiled faintly. "I'll arrange the transfer tomorrow morning," she said. Amara wiped her eyes gently, trying to absorb what she was witnessing. All these years she believed she knew her husband completely. Yet somehow he had been quietly funding medical treatments, helping abandoned children, and organizing an entire support network without ever telling her. Her mind struggled to understand how he had managed to keep such a huge part of his life hidden. Inside the room, another volunteer spoke. "We also received a request from a rural clinic outside Lagos," he said. "They have 2 critically ill children but no equipment." Tunde leaned slightly forward. "What do they need?" "A ventilator and surgical supplies." The man hesitated before continuing. "The cost will be significant." Tunde didn't even blink. "Send them what they need." The volunteer nodded respectfully. "Understood, Chairman." Tunde sighed softly again. "I told you, please stop calling me that." The room filled with gentle laughter. But the respect in everyone's eyes remained clear. The elegant woman closed one of the folders and turned toward the group. "I think it's important we remind ourselves why we're doing this," she said. She lifted one of the photographs from the table. It showed a small boy smiling widely, his arm wrapped in a clean white bandage. "This child was rejected by 3 hospitals before he came here," she said quietly. The room fell silent. His parents couldn't pay for surgery. They were ready to take him home and wait for the worst. She placed the photo back on the table. But he survived. Her eyes moved toward Tunde. Because someone refused to let money decide whether he lived or died. Several people in the room nodded in agreement. Tunde shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not the one doing the medical work," he said. "But you're the reason the work is possible," the doctor replied. Amara's chest filled with pride she could barely contain. She had spent the entire evening fearing betrayal, imagining the worst about the man she loved. Yet here he was, quietly changing lives without expecting recognition. Inside the building, the meeting continued for another several minutes. Plans were discussed. Budgets reviewed. New cases added to the list. Each time someone raised concerns about cost or resources, Tunde responded with calm determination. "Handle it. Make sure the child gets treatment. Send the funds." His decisions were never hesitant. It was clear he had been doing this for a long time. Eventually the elegant woman closed the final folder. "That concludes tonight's updates," she said. Several volunteers began organizing the papers. The doctors packed their bags. The room slowly filled with quiet conversation again. Tunde rubbed his forehead, looking slightly exhausted. The woman stepped closer to him. "You should rest," she said gently. "I will," he replied. "You're pushing yourself too hard." Tunde shook his head. "Compared to what those children are going through, I'm doing very little." The woman smiled. "You're doing more than most people ever will." Tunde looked toward the locked box still sitting on the table. "What about the documents that arrived tonight?" he asked. "They confirm everything," the woman said. "The government finally approved the registration for the center." Tunde's eyes widened slightly. "Official approval?" "Yes." She opened the box again and pulled out a sealed document. "The Children's Medical Support Foundation is now legally recognized." Several people nearby clapped softly. Tunde exhaled slowly. "That means we can expand operations," he said. "Exactly," the woman replied. "More clinics. More equipment. More children saved." Amara's heart swelled as she listened. She had always known Tunde was kind. But she never realized the scale of his compassion. Suddenly, without thinking, Amara moved. Her feet carried her toward the front door of the building. Each step felt heavy with emotion. Her hand reached for the handle. For a moment she hesitated. Not out of fear, but because she realized something important. Tunde hadn't hidden this secret to deceive her. He had hidden it because he wanted to help quietly. Without attention. Without praise. Amara took a deep breath. Then she pushed the door open. The hinges creaked softly. Inside the room, every head turned. Conversation stopped instantly. Tunde looked up. For a second he didn't move. Then his eyes widened in shock. "Amara?" The fear in his voice was unmistakable. He stepped away from the table quickly. "What are you doing here?" Amara walked slowly toward him, tears shining in her eyes. The entire room remained silent. Everyone seemed confused about the sudden appearance of the woman standing before their chairman. Tunde's voice lowered. "How did you?" "I followed you," Amara said gently. Tunde froze. His shoulders dropped slightly as realization sank in. "You followed me?" Amara nodded. "I saw the message on your phone." A deep look of regret crossed his face. "I never wanted you to find out like this," he said quietly. Amara looked around the room, the doctors, the volunteers, the files filled with children's names and medical reports. Then she looked back at her husband. "You've been doing all this alone?" Tunde didn't answer immediately. His eyes searched her face, trying to read her reaction. "I didn't want you to worry," he said softly. Amara felt tears rolling down her cheeks again. Instead of anger, she felt something completely different. Respect. Pride. Love deeper than anything she had felt before. The room remained silent as the truth filled the space between them. The room remained quiet as Amara stood in front of her husband, tears glistening on her cheeks. The volunteers and doctors exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether they should stay or quietly leave. Tunde looked as if the ground beneath him had shifted. For years he had carefully protected this secret from the one person whose opinion mattered most to him. And now she was standing right in front of him. "I'm sorry," he said softly. His voice carried the weight of someone who truly feared he had disappointed the person he loved. Amara shook her head slowly. "Sorry," she repeated gently. Tunde sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I should have told you," he admitted. "But I didn't want you worrying about it. I didn't want you thinking I was risking too much." Amara glanced around the room again. The doctors, the volunteers, the photographs of children on the table. All the evidence of what he had been doing quietly for years. 3 years, she said softly. Tunde nodded. "Yes. You've been doing this for 3 years, and I never knew." "I wanted it that way," he said. Amara stepped closer. "But why?" Tunde hesitated, searching for the right words. Finally he looked directly into her eyes. "Because I know you, Amara," he said quietly. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. If you knew how many children needed help, you would give away everything we have just to save them." Amara wiped her tears lightly. "That doesn't sound like a bad thing." He smiled faintly. "It is when it leaves you with nothing." She shook her head again. "You should have trusted me with the truth." Tunde looked down briefly. "You're right," he admitted. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then the elegant woman stepped forward. She smiled warmly at Amara. "I suppose introductions are overdue," she said. "My name is Dr. Aisha Bello." Amara nodded politely. "I'm Amara." "I know," Aisha said kindly. "Tunde talks about you often." Amara raised an eyebrow slightly. "He does?" Aisha laughed softly. "All the time. In fact, every time we try to convince him to accept public recognition for this work, he refuses." Tunde sighed. "Aisha?" But she continued anyway. His usual response is always the same. She looked at Amara and repeated the words clearly. "My wife didn't marry me to become famous. She married me to be a good man." Amara felt her chest tighten again. She looked at Tunde. "You said that?" Tunde looked slightly embarrassed. "Well, something like that." Aisha smiled. "The point is, he has always wanted this work to remain quiet." Another volunteer stepped forward. A young man carrying several files. "Madam," he said respectfully to Amara, "your husband has saved many lives." Amara glanced at the table again. The photograph suddenly carried even more meaning. One of the doctors picked up a picture and handed it to her. "This girl arrived here last year," the doctor explained. Amara studied the photo. It showed a small girl smiling brightly, holding a teddy bear. "She needed surgery," the doctor continued. "Her parents couldn't afford it." "And now?" Amara asked softly. "She's healthy," the doctor replied. Amara looked up at Tunde again. "How many?" she asked quietly. He frowned slightly. "How many what? How many children have you helped?" Tunde hesitated. "I never counted." Aisha crossed her arms and smiled knowingly. "That's not true." She turned to one of the volunteers. "Chinedu, the records." The man quickly opened a folder. 217 children so far, he said. Amara's eyes widened. 200. Tunde shifted uncomfortably again. The number isn't important. It is to them, Aisha said gently. Amara looked at the faces around the room. Everyone seemed to respect her husband deeply. Not because he demanded authority, but because of the lives he had helped save. She turned back to him. You carried all this responsibility alone. Tunde shrugged slightly. It never felt like a burden. But it must have been difficult. Sometimes, he admitted. He gestured toward the table. Some nights we lose children we can't save. The room grew quiet again. But most nights, he continued softly, we get to send them home alive. Amara walked closer until she was standing directly in front of him. Her voice was calm now. Do you know what I thought tonight? Tunde looked uncertain. What? I thought you were cheating on me. Several people in the room looked surprised. Tunde blinked in shock. You thought? Amara nodded. I saw the message on your phone. Then I saw you hugging Aisha outside. Aisha raised her hands defensively with a laugh. That was just a greeting. Tunde looked horrified. Oh no. Amara smiled faintly through her tears. For a moment I believed my entire marriage was falling apart. Tunde stepped closer to her. I would never betray you. I know that now, she said. Silence filled the room again. Then Amara suddenly wrapped her arms around him. Tunde froze in surprise for a second before hugging her back. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Tunde closed his eyes briefly. You're not angry. Amara pulled back and looked at him. Angry, she said softly. How could I be angry about this? She gestured toward the table. You've been saving children. Tunde exhaled deeply, as if releasing years of tension. I just wanted to help. You did more than help. Amara turned toward the group. How many people work here? She asked. About 20 volunteers, Aisha answered. And 3 doctors. Amara nodded slowly. Then I guess you'll need 21 volunteers now. Tunde frowned. What do you mean? Amara looked at him with determination. You've been doing this alone for 3 years. She squeezed his hand. You're not doing it alone anymore. Tunde stared at her, clearly surprised. You want to be involved? Yes. But Amara. She shook her head. No more secrets. A slow smile spread across his face. Aisha clapped her hands once. Well, she said cheerfully, I think the foundation just gained its newest member. The room filled with warm laughter. Amara walked toward the table and picked up one of the folders. She opened it and began reading the medical notes inside. Tunde watched her with quiet admiration. For the first time since he started the foundation, he no longer felt like he was carrying the responsibility alone. Amara looked back at him. You know something, she said. What? You tried to hide this from me. He nodded sheepishly. Yes. She smiled warmly. That was your biggest mistake. Why? Because now I'm involved. Tunde laughed softly. And that's a mistake. Amara squeezed his hand again. For the world, she said gently, it's the best mistake you could have made. And for the first time that night, everyone in the room felt something stronger than secrecy or fear. Hope.